Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 48 of our reading of the Rod Serling's Twilight Zone 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural. And as this was adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now, we're going to go over the copyright information, which should be on your screen right now, and I'm finding it right now in the book. Clearly says Rod Serling's Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company Incorporated, a Random House company, and the address is there if you want it. This book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, published and bound in the United States of America, and the Library of Congress information is there if you want it. Now, in the last one, the UN peacekeeping forces at Fort Defiance are seeing ghosts, and people are freaked out because the ghost of Roger Crisp, or aka Jolly Roger, is haunting the place. And we're going to find out there's some kind of bell ringing, and we're going to find out what's wrong. So let's go. Okay, we're going to go back one paragraph so we have more information. The colonel's plan was put into immediate effect, and it worked to perfection until a night when Mount Magombo was rumbling ominously and spouting flames lavishly. Down in the guardroom, Sergeant Dahazi was in charge of 30 men who were playing cards and writing letters home when a sudden jangle sounded from above the guardroom door. As Dahazi looked up, it came again more forcefully. Someone was tugging the cord in Crisp's apartment and ringing the bell in the guardroom just as Laxman had. But since no one was allowed in Crisp's apartment, Dahazi decided that he was being hoaxed. As the bell rang louder and more violently, he shouted to his men, "Let's go!" On the roof, Private Zuga of Iraq was on sentry duty with a companion, Private Mirza of India. As Zuga turned, he saw Mirza halted, staring at the steps from Crisp's apartment. The glare from the volcano showed a strange hypnotic glitter in Mirza's eyes, as though they were following a moving form across the roof. Then the spell was broken. Dahazi's full contingent poured into the doorway and stormed Crisp's apartment, while Dahazi shouted at Zuga and Mirza, demanding to know who was in there. Both sentries insisted that it was empty, and after a futile investigation, Dahazi and his men went back down into the guardroom. But who or what had rung those bells? Both Zuga and Mirza swore that they had seen no person enter or leave the closed apartment. But when Zuga told about Mirza's odd behavior, Mirza changed his story during an interview with Colonel Gandak. "I saw no person enter, sir," declared Mirza, "and I saw no person leave, but I did see something come from the closed door." "And what," asked Gandak, "was that something?" "A ghost," Mirza declared, "all in white, with a hat as big as a turban, and wearing a flowing robe. It must have been a ghost, for it came through the closed door. So I knew it was no person." And where did it go? And where did it go from there, Mirza? "Toward the watchtower, where when Sergeant Dahazi arrived with all his men, and puff, the ghost vanished." "And that would be all, Mirza." But it was not all. Talk of the ghost was now so common at Fort Defiance that the soldiers were becoming restless. It was obvious that they would have to be switched to and from Cape Regal to keep the situation in hand. Soon the fort would become simply a reception center for new troops before they were sent on peacekeeping expeditions or to round up insurgents in the mountains. That wasn't to Colonel Gandak's liking, as the UN Security Council had ordered him to create a permanent garrison that could be maintained after other troops had been withdrawn. So Colonel Gandak sent for Captain O'Shea. You started all this, Captain," Gandak reminded him in a tone of more than slight reproof. If it hadn't been for that prank of yours, things would not be so bad. Can you suggest a remedy?" "I made the ghost walk once," returned O'Shea, stroking his chin reflectively. Maybe I could do the same thing again, but that would only make matters worse. I don't think so, Colonel. The officers saw through my masquerade, though we did chase an imaginary ghost later. Oshia gave a short laugh, as though dismissing that recollection. Suppose I stage another prank for Mirza's benefit, to let him see how he was fooled. That would impress the other sentries as well. You have my approval, Gandak nodded. I'm quite sure that Mirza was halfway in a dream state when he thought he saw that ghost. It would be good to snap him out of such notions. Captain O'Shea and a few fellow officers rigged the ghost. They ran a wire from the steps outside Crisp's closed door over toward the watchtower. They doubled the wire around an intervening bastion back to the cannon ramp to it. They hooked a light dummy draped in sheets and crowned with a plumed hat. They hung this down over the parapet, which with a line attached, so that it could be drawn up through the embrasure. To do all this, they dismissed the pair of sentries late one afternoon, shortly before Mirza and Zuga came on duty. Once the thing was rigged, they let the wire lie slack. Then they went down to the officers' quarters and waited until the next change of sentries in order to have more witnesses. In addition, Captain O'Shea told Sergeant Dahazi to have a few picked men ready as onlookers. When the right time came, Captain O'Shea and Lieutenant Ahmed came up through the cannon ramp with Sergeant Dahazi and a few men close behind. Other officers and men were in different doorways, a few to each. A corporal was on the roof with two new sentries to replace Mirza and Zuga. None of these men knew about the rigged ghost. First, O'Shea drew the wire taut. Then he reeled in the line, bringing the dummy up through the embrasure and dragging it over to the steps of the governor's apartment. Mount Magombo was furnishing just the right amount of intermittent glow to outline the human figure on the roof, to reveal the ghost. Captain O'Shea gave the line a well-timed tug. Private Mirza stared towards the governor's apartment, froze in his tracks as the whitish form loomed upward and forward so suddenly that it seemed to have come through the closed door. Then its motion became a steady, ghostly glide down the steps, as O'Shea slackened the wire slightly, then across the roof as he pulled it taut again and reeled in the line at a set rate. Coming into the glare of Mount Magombo, the ghost took on a ruddy tinge that heightened the weird, soul-chilling effect. The corporal and the other sentries, noting Mirza, now saw what he was watching, and they froze as well. O'Shea spoke in an undertone to Ahmed. A better ghost than I was. It looks real, doesn't it? Very, very real, Captain, replied Ahmed. Almost as real as the real ghost we both saw later. Forget about that, Ahmed. Just watch this ghost. And particularly watch Mirza. He's taking it to be real. And when we show it to be fake, his whole story will fall apart. Shakily, Mirza was raising his gun as though to fire at the gliding white shape. Then losing his nerve, he sagged back. The rifle dropped from his numbed hand. Its clatter provided the only sound that broke that deep, uncanny hush. When Magombo rumbled in the distant background, the other sentries witnessed Mirza's terror begin to cower too coolly. O'Shea handed the line to Ahmed. Keep reeling it in, the captain said, while I go out there and show up the fake. This will really knock out the ghost business. Captain O'Shea spoke too soon. At that moment, Private Mirza snapped out of his coma and dashed forward on the double before the astonished eyes of the other sentries and the hidden watchers as well. Mirza reached the glided figure, snatched it from the line with his bare hands, and tore it apart. Hat from drape and threw the pieces on the roof. Laughing at the top of his voice, Mirza stamped on the remnants of the ghost and shouted, "A trick! A silly trick! Somebody thought they could fool me. Me, the man who knows a real ghost when he sees one. Um, OSHA grabbed the line from Ahmed. Ahmed hauled it in and dropped it. He waved Ahmed forward and followed by Dahazdi and the others, they joined the group that was now crowding around Mirza, who had become the hero of the occasion. OSHA, having disposed of the proof that linked him to the hoax, asked casually, "How did you know it was a fake, um, Mirza?" "It was very simple, sir," Mirza replied. "It looked like a real ghost I saw the other night until it came in front of a volcano. The time the time real ghost walked by, I could see the mountain, smoke, fire and all, right through it. With this one, I could no longer see volcano when it came between." He picked up the torn sheet, spread it to obscure the distant summit of Mogambo. "No mountain, no ghost. I mean, no real ghost." Oshia's scheme had backfired, as was proven the next day when the entire garrison accepted the ghost of the original Jolly Roger was genuine. The men became more jittery than ever and kept going about in pairs, afraid that they might glimpse old Jolly Roger at any turn. Colonel Gandak might have stemmed the growing terror of the unexplainable, but now the row of bells in the garrison room began jangling almost every other night. They would start gently and then become violently, causing a rush of soldiers up to the roof. Always they found the sentries going their usual rounds, and always the governor's apartment was empty. But no one saw the ghost of Jolly Roger stalking in and out. Maybe the spook was piqued by Oshia's prank. Perhaps he was just trying a new technique by jangling the bells and nothing more. Either way, something had to be done. Colonel Gandak, put a huge padlock on the door of the governor's apartment and kept the only key himself, but the bell still continually jangled violently every few nights. Gandak then had the officers trace the bell ropes down to the guard room to find out if anyone was tampering with them along the way. They followed them through every floor, including the small openings in the masonry that had been plastered over the bastion after Crisp's death, yet nowhere could they find a spot where the ropes had been touched. When Gandak asked the officers what they thought caused the repeating ringing, someone suggested rats. "Rats," the colonel stormed. "How could rats get into those stone walls? What would they do? Gnaw their way up and down the ropes?" Gandak pondered. "Maybe they could at that," he said more calmly, and the way to prove it is to get rid of the ropes. Get rid of the ropes they did, and with that the ghostly manifestation ceased. Mount Magumbo flared nightly, sentries patrolled regularly, troops lounged in the guardroom, but there was no longer a parading spook, no longer any ringing bells. With Crisp's apartment padlocked, the bells and the bell ropes gone, all seemed fine, but Colonel Gandak was far from satisfied. "Okay, all this is like sitting on top of Mount Magumbo," the colonel told his staff. "The quieter it gets, the more likely it is to break loose suddenly, and on a grand scale, we know there is a ghost around, and we must find out what he is cooking up to learn whether it is for good or bad. Any other group might have taken this with skepticism, but the members of the UN Occupational Peace Force included men from so many different countries, steeped in such a variety of legends that a mere exchange of ideas could cause them to accept almost anything in the realm of the macabre. But now, to the men still at Fort Defiance represented a hardcore who were determined to see this struggle with the unknown straight through to the finish. When Captain Oshia suggested calling in Laxman, the one man really informed on the Jolly Roger ghost lore, the other officers were enthused at the idea, and Colonel Gandak approved it. Laxman was present at the next conference. With him, he had stacks of records and reports pertaining to Fort Defiance. Colonel Gandak opened with the query. What is behind all this, Laxman? We are convinced that the ghost is real, though we want the men to think otherwise. But why should Jolly Roger haunt this fort? Opinions vary as to that, Laxman replied, blinking in owlish fashion through his thick glasses. I have talked with members of psychic research societies and professors from great universities who came here to investigate. They agree on one thing: that there is no ghost? No, no. Like you, they think there is a ghost. They agree that such a specter must have some purpose. And what kind of purpose would it be? Several types are possible, asserted Laxman in a scholarly tone. Some ghosts have been known to guard treasure, sometimes driving people away, other times leading them there. The same applies to places where a body is buried. In other cases, a ghost seeks to make amends for some past crime. Until they have done that, they continue to haunt. Would that apply to Governor Crisp? I would say so, but I do not know. I only give opinions of noted professors who study parapsychology and psychic science. Even they do not agree. Later, Colonel Gandak held a meeting with his officers in the very courtroom where the portrait of Governor Crisp glowered down upon the judgment seat. There they decided on ways and means to bait his ghostly counterpart. Crisp was a pirate in his day, declared Colonel Gandak, but he reformed so he could have dug up his treasure long before he died. I think we can rule out that possibility. The same applies to the way he hanged pirates, Lieutenant Hadrup asserted. This was customary in those days, so Crisp wouldn't have felt regrets over taking their lives. Up to that last time, Lieutenant Alvarez corrected, he was wrong in hanging the men from the Falcon. Apparently, he was trying to prevent their execution by ringing the guardroom, and his ghost has gone on trying ever since. In that case, Captain O'Shea suggested, we should put the ropes back on the bells. He turned to Colonel Gandak. What about it, sir? It would give our ghost a fighting chance. As an operational peace force of the United Nations, declared Gandak sternly, our purpose is to see that no one has a fighting chance, because our job is to stop all fighting. That goes for ghosts as well as political factions. If you refuse to pamper them, they will no longer bother you. Once you have them under such control, you can report your mission as accomplished. By discouraging the ghost, Gandak hoped to prevent its reappearance, but he posted men at key spots in the fort to relay word of any new manifestations. All men on patrol were to converge on any spot where the ghost was reported, while a picked squad was to come up from the guardroom and cut off its escape. The rest of the garrison was to go out to the parade ground and watch for pranksters on the parapets. Under those rigid regulations, nothing happened at Fort Defiance until the night the operational force was ready to pack up and leave. Gandak read a report to O'Shea and asked what he thought of it. It's fine, sir, said O'Shea, but all your emphasis is on the battling political factions with no word about our ghost. This report is for the UN Security Council, retorted Gandak, so they can open negotiations with the factions mentioned. Can you tell me how they could negotiate with a ghost? O'Shea couldn't answer that, but then made a final inspection tour. He became very reflective when he reached the roof. Things are too quiet, Captain O'Shea told Lieutenant Alvarez, who had accompanied him. He gestured off toward the darkened hills. Why, even the volcano has quit acting up. If Private Mirza was on duty, he could tell a real ghost from a fake tonight. They passed sentries on the way down to the guardroom. Most of the 60 men there had already packed up their dunnage for tomorrow's departure. But Sergeant Dehazy was maintaining full discipline. This is our last night to catch old Jolly Roger, said Dehazy, smiling from beneath his tilted beret. My men would like that. All your men, Sergeant? Oshia asked. All the inside guard, Dahazi amended. They volunteered for that duty. The rest are assigned to the outside. If you want me to show you, sir. No, no, broke in Oshia. The colonel might think it was another hoax. Tell me, Sergeant, how did you manage to build the men's morale up to its present state? Because of the bells, Dahazi confided. I mean, because they didn't ring before. The men wondered about who was pulling the ropes, thinking it had to be a ghost. But when the colonel took the ropes away, he shook his head and smiled. They said it would take a real ghost and a good one to ring those bells now. You see, sir, Captain O'Shea saw. Though he hadn't before, he realized how cleverly Colonel Gandak had handled this group of varied nationalities who believed in so many legends that it was easy for them to laugh at a ghost who couldn't ring bells. And what would happen if those bells rang now? O'Shea asked. I wouldn't want to say, Sir. Dahazi paused and pondered, except the inside squad might become the outside squad. And the outside squad? Well, they would be on their way clear to Camp Regal if nobody stopped them. Dahazi looked up toward the disconnected bells. If those bells begin to ring right now, sir, I wouldn't be responsible for what might. Before Dahazi could say a word, the word happened. It did. The bells began to ring. After a slight clank, they tinkled a trifle more, and then the men were at attention, all looking up at the bells. So was Sergeant Dahazi. Tough though he was the most impressed. Captain O'Shea heard the bells and was quick to realize that it would not be smart to look at them, rather than admit that they mattered. He turned to Lieutenant Alvarez, who was looking at Captain O'Shea with the same thought in mind. Dahazi's right, O'Shea muttered. His men would be on the way out right now if those bells were ringing hard. But why? Asked Alvarez. Are they ringing at all? I don't know, but if Dahazi doesn't act fast, I'll have to. O'Shea did some mental juggling and suggested. You ask him, Lieutenant. Muy bien, Alvarez agreed. Very good. He stepped over, tapped Dahazi on the shoulder, and said, It must be a good ghost, Sergeant. Shouldn't you be giving orders? Dahazi turned with angry eyes and saw Captain O'Shea staring from beyond. O'Shea nodded, and Dahazi swung to his men. Inside detail, fall in. The men snapped to attention at those words. Follow me on the double. It was timely, for by then the bells were ringing loudly, violently, despite the fact that there were no cords. Alvarez looked at O'Shea and confirmed. You timed it perfectly, Captain. The credit is all yours, Lieutenant O'Shea replied. But by then the bells were setting up a terrific clangor. Dahazi's picked squad had fallen in and were simply waiting for word to be relayed by the sentinels, telling him just where the source of the trouble lay, but Captain O'Shea didn't need such information. O'Shea snapped to Alvarez. Take charge of the outside detail, Lieutenant. I'll handle this group. Then O'Shea barked to Dahazi. Why are we waiting, Sergeant? We know where the trouble must be. Whoever is ringing the bells is up in the governor's apartment. Come along. As O'Shea started for the stone stairs, Dahazi yelled to his squad, Follow me. Dahazi's men followed on the double, and as they surged after O'Shea, they swept along astonished sentinels. Posting higher up, those watchers had heard the bells and hadn't reported to the guardroom because it was from there that the terrific cacophony came. Once Dahazi's 20-men contingent was on its way up to the roof, Lieutenant Alvarez had no trouble marching the remaining 40 soldiers out through the sally port, where he stationed them about the parade ground to watch the ramparts and respond to any signal from the roof. Meanwhile, the Dahazi squad was tearing past Gandak's office, where the colonel was completing the report that completely debunked the rumors of Jolly Roger's ghost. Hearing the clatter, Gandak opened his door and caught the echo of the bells from far below. echo of the bells from far below. Realizing that what must have happened, the colonel grabbed the key to the big padlock on Crisp's apartment and joined the rush. By now, the word had been relayed to all the scattered sentinels who were converging in from their key posts and the swelling the charging crew. In fact, the only men in complete ignorance of what was going on were the two sentinels who were pacing the roof itself. They swung about, raising their rifles as the surge came from the ramp. They recognized Captain O'Shea as the leader. They came to attention. O'Shea waved for his followers to fan out, which they did. Then Colonel Gandak arrived and handed him the big key, saying, "Go on, Captain. See who the prankster is tonight, and find out how he's ringing those bells, whoever he is. We'll discipline him, and properly." Okay. We're going to have to stop it here and find out who the trickster is. We are almost done with this story. We only have a couple pages left, but we will pick this up at a future time. We have been reading from Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson. And we have been reading The Ghost of Jolly Roger. Now, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.